You walk into your kitchen or bathroom after yet another long day, and right there in that first glance, it hits you again. That quiet, almost invisible disappointment. The counters are clean enough, the items are organized on the surface, but the whole setup feels flat, sterile, unintentionally cheap, like it's missing the effortless polish you see in those effortlessly refined homes that make you pause and think, this is what luxury really feels like. You've felt it in your own space more times than you'd like to admit, haven't you? That subtle sense that, despite your best efforts, the room lands somewhere between functional and forgettable, never quite crossing into the calm, collected, expensive calm that signals true sanctuary. And here's what's really happening beneath the surface. Your brain, wired over countless generations of evolutionary adaptation to scan environments for cues of safety, abundance, and intentional care, is picking up on micro signals of disorder and uniformity that trigger a low-level cognitive friction. It's not dramatic, but it's there, the single plane trap, that optical illusion where everything sits at the same height and material on a flat counter, causing your eyes to glide across in a straight W pattern of visual boredom with no depth, no hierarchy, no emotional pull to linger and feel at ease. The result? A space that feels sanitization trapped, overly clinical, stripped of the subtle richness that makes a room breathe luxury without ever raising its voice. But the most empowering part, the part that changes everything in under 60 seconds, is that you don't need a full renovation. You don't need new cabinets or expensive countertops to shift this. Luxury here is about editing what you already own, with the kind of thoughtful precision that most people never notice until they experience it. Let me show you exactly how a single, deliberate swap can rewrite the entire narrative of your counters, and, by extension, the emotional tone of the room itself. The easiest, most transformative one-minute trick begins with something you touch and see every single day. Those everyday bottles of soap, lotion, and dish detergent that are probably sitting there right now in clear plastic, screaming practicality over presence. Swap them out for a matching set of amber glass bottles with brushed brass pumps, and watch what happens neurologically and optically in real time. Here's the science behind why this tiny change feels like unlocking a secret code most homeowners will never discover. Your visual cortex is constantly processing light and shadow as evolutionary markers of depth and quality. Amber glass doesn't just look warmer, it softly diffuses harsh overhead reflections that make plastic feel cheap and disposable, instead creating gentle, glowing undertones that mimic the golden hour light our ancestors associated with safe, resource-rich environments. This introduces what I call the amber uniformity principle, where the consistent warm tint across 3 or 4 bottles creates a deliberate visual rhythm that guides your eye in a gentle, satisfying M pattern rather than letting it scatter chaotically. The brushed brass pumps add micro-contrast and a touch of visual gravity, anchoring the setup with that premium metallic warmth that plays off the glass like a subtle plot twist in a perfectly paced story. Unexpected, yet inevitable. Pulling the whole composition together without ever feeling forced. Place them on a low marble or stone riser, just 1 inch high, and suddenly you've broken the single plane trap entirely, introducing the lofting effect, where the slight elevation creates shadow play underneath that adds instant depth and dimension. Your brain registers this as intentional hierarchy, reducing mental load because the eye now has a clear foreground, middle ground, and background to rest upon. Much like how a masterful landscape painting uses layered elements to draw you deeper into the scene rather than leaving you stranded on a flat canvas. Think about it this way. Before the swap, your counters were broadcasting sanitization trap energy. Everything matte, uniform, and screaming utilitarian only. After, the amber tones blend seamlessly with linen towels, beige walls, or light wood cabinetry, creating that boutique hotel warmth that feels quietly expensive because it whispers care rather than shouting expense. And here's another pro move that elevates it further without adding a single extra item. Line up exactly 3 bottles: dish soap, hand wash, lotion, in that perfect odd number balance known as the 357 rule of curation, where the human eye finds odd groupings inherently more harmonious and less contrived than even ones. The result isn't just cleaner, it's calmer. You feel it immediately in how your shoulders drop when you enter the space, how the room now signals abundance and refinement instead of hurried functionality. If you prefer an even softer, more modern take, opt for frosted amber glass instead of clear. The matte finish diffuses light beautifully, turning reflections into a gentle haze that softens the entire counter-narrative and prevents that sterile glare that can make even high-end materials feel cold. Pair the trio with a small ceramic accent piece or a single subtle branch in a low vase off to the side, and you've layered in just enough organic texture to break any lingering monotony while still letting the bottles do the heavy lifting. This isn't decoration for decoration's sake. It's psychological editing at its finest, where negative space around the group creates breathing room that your brain interprets as calm control, the kind of quiet order that makes a space feel collected rather than cluttered. I can't conclude this section without mentioning how the warm amber against an off-white or light stone background creates that subtle contrast designers rely on to evoke emotional equilibrium. Your eyes rest, your mind relaxes, and suddenly the entire kitchen or bath feels like it belongs in a high-end residence rather than a rushed morning routine. Now, once those counters are singing with intention, the next 1-minute shift is all about containment, because scattered small items are the silent killers of perceived luxury. You've seen it in your own home, the coffee table covered in random remotes, books, and cups that somehow make the whole room feel busy and unresolved, even when everything is neat. This is the clutter scatter effect in action, where your brain's evolutionary preference for pattern recognition gets overwhelmed by visual noise, spiking cognitive load and making the space feel smaller, cheaper, less composed. The cheat code here is grouping those items onto a single tray or shallow bowl, instantly transforming chaos into deliberate curation and turning what felt accidental into something that reads as thoughtfully styled. On your coffee table, reach for a round woven tray, something in natural fibers that adds organic warmth, and keep it tight. A candle, a small vase, perhaps one decorative object, with the textured wood of the table itself and a couple of stacked books, providing the height variation. The tray acts as a visual boundary, the 80-20 rule of curation in practice, where 20% of the surface does 80% of the emotional work, allowing negative space to breathe and create that expensive calm. Your eyes now travel in a satisfying rhythm across the composition, pausing on the tray as the focal anchor before moving outward, reducing the terminator lines, the harsh edges where objects abruptly stop and start, that can make a room feel chopped up and unresolved. In the entryway, the same principle applies with even more power. A simple tray on your console table becomes the containment harmony that signals arrival and order the moment you walk through the door. One slim lamp, a catch-all bowl, a single candle holder, and then deliberately leave the rest open. The negative space around that curated group creates visual equilibrium, making the whole setup feel hotel lobby refined rather than hallway cluttered. Place the tray slightly off-center for organic energy, pulling the eye in a gentle curve that mimics natural landscape flow. And suddenly, the plain console you already own reads as intentional architecture. Bedside, use a shallow bowl to hide the everyday necessities: earbuds, lip balm, rings, while a lamp, framed art, and candle sit openly beside it. This micro-hack keeps the nightstand surface pristine, eliminating visual friction so your brain registers the space as restorative rather than functional storage. The psychological benefit is profound. Less noise means deeper relaxation, that subtle shift from "this is where I crash" to "this is where I restore." In the kitchen, luxury leans even more minimal, so a round stone tray holds just the essentials: oil cruet, salt and pepper grinders, a tiny bud vase, while wood cutting boards layered behind add height and texture without busyness. The result is a working counter that feels lived in, yet composed. The rough grain of the boards playing against the smooth stone in what I call tactile depth layering, where contrasting materials create micro shadows and visual interest that keep the eye engaged without overwhelming it. With surfaces now edited and contained, it's time to bring life back into the equation, because a room without movement or organic energy can still feel static, no matter how neat it is. Nothing shifts the entire atmosphere faster than introducing tall branches or stems in a beautiful vase. The vertical lofting effect that adds instant height, drama, and narrative flow without a single extra purchase beyond what's already in season. On a sideboard or console, choose bare branches in a textured ceramic vase. The rough finish grounds the setup, while the height fills the empty vertical plane between furniture and ceiling, creating balance that makes the whole room feel larger and more open. Optically, this pulls your gaze upward in that satisfying W pattern, breaking horizontal monotony and evoking the evolutionary comfort of tall trees signaling shelter and perspective. The brain registers scale and proportion as markers of thoughtful design, reducing any dollhouse effect where everything feels miniaturized and insubstantial. If you want warmer, seasonal richness, reach for branches with subtle rust or muted red tones. These add depth and emotional temperature without clashing with neutrals, layering in the kind of quiet richness you see in magazine dining rooms. Pair them with dark furniture or layered artwork, and the texture contrast creates soul, that friction between eras and materials that makes a space feel collected over time rather than assembled overnight. For entry corners or dining areas, an oversized vase on a floor stand or pedestal becomes a statement that commands the space with minimal effort. The branches draw the eye upward, giving the illusion of height even in compact rooms, rooted in our innate understanding of proportion, where one tall, clean element allows everything else to feel composed around it. If your style leans lighter, real flowers in a crisp white vase bring personality and warmth, but keep the rest of the setup calm. Just a few books, a candle, so the blooms become the subtle focal point rather than competing noise. This is the 80-20 rule of life, bringing in action. 20% organic element transforms 80% of the room's perceived vitality. The sensory shift is immediate. Movement from swaying stems, soft shadows cast by leaves, that gentle rustle that makes the space feel alive and breathing rather than posed and plastic. Psychologically, greenery signals abundance and care, lowering stress hormones and inviting that deep exhale your nervous system has been craving. Once the vertical plane is activated, the next layer is texture mixing, because a room that feels one note in material is neurologically flat, lacking the constructive friction that creates depth and richness. Boucle and linen together are a masterclass here. The cozy, nubby boucle chair gains instant elevation when draped with a lightweight linen throw, the soft against the structured, creating what I call texture symphony harmony. Add a smooth metal or glass lamp nearby, and the warm, cool, soft, sleek interplay engages your tactile imagination even when you're not touching anything. Your brain fills in the sensory gaps, making the neutral palette feel layered and expensive rather than safe and dull. Behind a sofa or in open areas, rough woven baskets or natural accents ground smoother modern lines, adding weight and warmth that prevents the sanitization trap from creeping back in. This balance of rough with smooth, matte with subtle shine, is optical gold. Shadows fall differently across each surface, sculpting mass and creating the illusion of greater depth. Much like how a cloudy day versus sunset light changes how a landscape painting feels alive. In bolder contemporary spaces, plush velvet beside wool or boucle cushions heightens intentionality. The fabrics highlight each other, giving visual richness that makes simple setups feel collected and designer curated. The emotional payoff? A room that feels lived in yet refined, soulful rather than showroom sterile, because texture is the quiet language your brain translates as history, care, and quiet luxury. With surfaces refined and textures layered, turn your attention to the walls. Because a single large piece of artwork against clean negative space becomes the ultimate focal point anchor that structures an entire room in one move. The psychology here is powerful. Your visual system seeks hierarchy, a clear resting place for the eyes that reduces scanning fatigue and creates emotional resolution. Hang one oversized piece on a blank wall, neutral tones with soft texture or subtle pattern, and let it breathe. The empty space around it is what makes it sing, turning the wall into architecture rather than mere backdrop. Tones that echo the room's palette, like soft beige or tan with a hint of gold, blend seamlessly while still catching light in ways that add quiet depth. One large piece does the work of a dozen small ones because it avoids the gallery wall trap, where too many elements create visual chaos and cheapen the overall impact. Lean a framed piece casually against a console instead of hanging it, and the relaxed placement feels modern and intentional, especially paired with low objects below. The clean wall behind keeps focus laser sharp, mimicking the effortless curation you see in true designer homes. For minimalist leanings, a striking black and white photo or print above the sofa reads cinematic and sophisticated, a light wood frame softening the contrast and tying everything into the palette. Or create a small, perfectly spaced gallery grid with matching frames on a neutral background. The uniformity signals tailoring, not clutter. Most importantly, restrain. Fewer, better pieces create that expensive restraint your brain interprets as confidence and taste. No discussion of wall power would be complete without mirrors, because a large one doesn't just reflect light, it expands architecture itself, bouncing illumination and creating the reflection expansion technique that makes even modest rooms feel airy and composed. Lean a tall mirror casually against the wall at a slight angle for that relaxed designer energy. The frame becomes furniture, light wood blending with neutrals or darker metal adding contrast. Place a large potted plant beside the base for grounding, and the composition gains balance, while multiplied light and texture turn a quiet corner into a focal point that feels natural and lived in. In entryways or behind a console, the mirror multiplies every detail, giving lamps and vases twice the visual weight for that instant hotel lobby finish. Choose an aged or gold-framed mirror for warmer, rustic spaces. The patina catches light beautifully against stone or textured walls, softening the whole narrative with refinement that feels both old and new. This isn't decoration. It's optical architecture, shaping how light sculpts the room and how your brain perceives scale and openness. Finally, no space reaches its luxurious potential without thoughtful lighting, because light is the sculptor that reveals every other layer. A brass picture light above a sketch or neutral artwork creates soft, directional glow against a darker wall, the warm metal against cool surface, generating layered contrast that designers crave. The art now feels intentional, spotlighted, like it's meant to be there rather than merely hung. In brighter rooms, a minimalist picture, light over a bold canvas, grounds strong color with subtle highlight, shifting hierarchy, so the piece commands attention while the rest stays calm. Layer it with a table lamp, warmth from below, directional glow from above, and the interplay of light levels creates depth, shadow, and mood that makes everything feel premium. This is the true essence of quiet luxury. Not loud purchases, but accumulated thoughtful choices. Amber bottles, contained trays, lofting branches, textured harmonies, anchored art, expansive mirrors, sculpted light that add up to a home that feels expensive because it finally feels cared for on every level. You've just been handed the insider knowledge that transforms how you see your own space forever. Every small edit compounds, turning ordinary into orchestrated, sterile into soulful, flat into dimensional. The room that once whispered, "good enough," now speaks in the calm, reassuring language of true refinement. and you feel it in the way you move through it, the way you exhale upon entering, the way it supports rather than drains. This is the power of seeing with designer eyes, understanding the psychology, the optics, the evolutionary cues that make a house a home worth lingering in. And while you've now mastered these surface and wall shifts that deliver instant impact, there's an even deeper layer waiting when you begin to consider how furniture placement and negative space can amplify everything we've covered here, creating rooms that don't just look expensive, but feel profoundly, undeniably yours.